Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Lord Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasta Praishvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. What a pleasure to be here this morning, reading this beautiful section of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the 9th chapter of the first canto. And the topic this morning is setting the scene. So we're going to do a little review and then read this section and use it as an introduction to the chapter that's coming. Okay? So I'm sure everyone has been vigorously studying Srimad Bhagavatam during the break, right? So probably a review is unnecessary, but just in case one or two of you may have missed. So we're starting chapter 9 of the first canto, and the first 3 chapters of the first canto deal with Krishna and Bhakti. The first 3 chapters just introduce Krishna, Janmadyasya Yatonvaya, and then Bhakti. Vaipum Samparo Dharma, just how we relate to Krishna. What's the philosophical framework, just from the outset. And the next 3 chapters deal with Srimad Bhagavatam. What is the history of the book? So the author, Vyasa, is explaining how he came to write the book. And who gave him the instruction to write it? His guru, Narada Muni, yes. So that whole interaction is described, as well as his guru's background and credentials. And then the next 3 chapters introduce the 2 principal personalities of Srimad Bhagavatam. Who are they? The speaker and the hearer of the Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami, the speaker, and Maharaj Parikshit, the hearer, the listener. So there's very little about the Shukadeva, the speaker, just a few phrases, but the rest of the first canto is more or less devoted to Maharaj Parikshit, the person who learns Srimad Bhagavatam. So we're going to, we got a little introduction to Maharaj Parikshit in the previous chapter, in which he was an embryo in his mother's womb and protected by Lord Krishna. He saw Krishna in the womb, and then he, from then on, wanted to go out and find where is Krishna. Therefore, his name is Parikshit, which means one who examines. So he's looking everywhere. There's no one as good as that person I saw when I was a kid. Where is that person? Parikshit. So you remember now the Bhagavad Gita is spoken on this battlefield of Kurukshetra. Now this big war is over. The Bhagavad Gita has been spoken. The war is resolved. Yudhisthira and the Pandavas, brothers of Arjuna, have won the war. And Krishna said, okay, my business here is finished. Now I'm going to be leaving. And then, first of all, Parikshit's mother comes running up to him and says, no, don't leave. I'm being threatened. My baby in the womb is being threatened. So then Krishna resolves that. And he's getting ready to leave again. And then someone else comes running up to him and says, don't leave. Who is that? Kunti. Yes, Kunti comes up and says, oh, wait a minute. I've got to talk to you. And she speaks these beautiful prayers. And Krishna's smiling, thank you very much. And then he's getting ready to leave. And then someone else comes running up to him. Who is that? Just at the very end of the last chapter. Anyone remember? Somebody was feeling very, very morose about all that had happened. Yudhisthira. All right, the king, the new king, the leader of the Pandavas, Arjuna's elder brother. And why is he feeling so bad? Gopi? Oh, that's right. Go ahead. I'll repeat it. We don't have to. Oh, okay. Understand. I don't want to get too bogged down now.
I'm not sure if my answer is correct, but he's a very pious king, very sympathetic and empathetic, and all the loss of life was very troubling to him.
Yes.
He feels responsible, personally responsible, because he's a good king. So he feels like anything that happens in the kingdom, which was kind of the whole world at that time, is his responsibility.
Yes. You have this dichotomy of the soft heart and then the responsibility of ruling. So Yudhisthira, at the very end of the last chapter, gives a soliloquy saying, it's the duty of the king to protect the people, but that doesn't absolve me of all the sin from this war, because it only took place because I wanted to rule the kingdom. That really was not actually the case. But again, being so very pious and soft-hearted, he was feeling this way, very dejected. All these men had to die just so I could become the king. And therefore, he's very depressed and discouraged and down on himself. He uses this example that Krishna, he says, Krishna, you're wanting me now to perform sacrifices, but what good will the sacrifices do? He says, if you take mud and filter muddy water through it, it will not make it pure. If you take a pot that has been stained by wine and then use wine to try to purify it, that will be useless. So I'm such a sinner, even if I do sacrifices, what is the point? So in this despondent state, he has also approached Krishna, to which Krishna says, let's go talk to who? Who's the wisest man on the battlefield? Who? Bhishma. So that's where chapter 9 of this next section begins, of this next chapter. Bhishma is going to give instructions to Yudhisthira to help him get out of his depression. So much of spiritual life and spiritual conversations are like that, isn't it? People are depressed, they're discouraged, they're bewildered, and then spirituality creates purpose and meaning and hope. So Bhishma is here to give Yudhisthira hope. That's what will transpire in this chapter. We had one chapter devoted to Kunti, and now this chapter devoted to Bhishma. And finally, Krishna will be able to leave, but that will be the next chapter. So a little background first. I'll tell you what, why don't we read these? What should we do first? Should we do the background about Bhishma, or should we read what he... The background? Okay. So there was once a great king named Shantanu. And as kings are prone to do, he was out wandering the riverbank one day, and he saw a beautiful maiden. And he said, are you occupied? And she said, no, I will be your bride, provided that you never question anything I do. So ladies, you might want to write this down for me. If you never question anything that I do, then I will stay with you. So he agreed. He was so smitten with her beauty. And so they were married, and she had a child. She gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And then she immediately took the boy and went down to the Ganga and threw the baby in the water. And Shantanu was saying, but he remembered his promise. He didn't question. And again this happened, and again this happened. And 7 times it happened. And every time he bit his tongue. And finally the 8th son was born, and he said, "What are you doing?" To which he said, "You promised you would never question anything I do. So therefore I have to leave you now. But because you've been a good husband, I will leave this last son. I will bring this son back to you in the future." And then she was gone with the boy. So the king, of course, was brokenhearted, bewildered by all of this, but he pressed on. Then some years later, again, he was down at the Ganga. And Ganga's a big river, like the St. John's up in Jacksonville. It's really a big, huge river. Ganga's like that, or even bigger. And as the king was walking, he noticed that there was a boy with a bow and arrow, and he was shooting arrows in such a way as to stop the flow of the river. And then the river would flow again, and then the boy would shoot and stop. It was as if he was playing with the river. And then the king was astonished by this sight. Then all of a sudden there again was his former wife. And she said, "This is your son, Devarata, and he has been trained in archery and military arts by Parasuram. So now I'm bringing him back to you, and he will be your heir and your aide." And so Shantanu was very, very pleased by this, and the former wife was revealed to be actually Ganga personified, and her son was just playing with her like this. So she left. Shantanu, overjoyed, took his young son back home and raised him, and they were inseparable, father and son. So most of the time, that is. So the boy was being groomed to be the heir to the throne, and of course every king wants that, a worthy heir and a son. And so as the boy grew, one day Shantanu did go out again by himself, which is when he tends to get in trouble. So this time he was out, and he came to a river where there was no bridge, but there was a boat to take the people across the river. And this boat was rowed by a beautiful young woman. And so again, the king became attracted to this beautiful young girl. And he went to her father, who was a fisherman, very low class occupation. But he was the king of the fishermen. He said, "I want to marry your daughter." And of course, he thought the fisherman would be very honored. My daughter will become a princess. But this fisherman was very shrewd. And he said, no, I can't let you marry my daughter, because her sons will want to become the heir to your kingdom, but you already have an heir, Devarata. And so the king was brokenhearted, but he did not pursue the matter. But when he came back home, his son, Devarata, could see, "My father is depressed. Something must have happened. Father, are you all right?" "Oh, yeah, everything's fine." But he could still tell there was something wrong. So he went out and retraced his father's steps, and he found the fisherman. And the fisherman related all that had happened. And Bhishma said, "Well, okay, all right. If that's your condition, I will renounce the throne, and your daughter's sons can become the next king." But the shrewd fisherman said, "Well, okay, wait a minute. What if you get married? If you get married, then your sons are going to want the throne, and my daughter's sons are going to want the throne, and there's going to be a big fight." And then Devarata said, "All right, then I will not marry. I will never marry." So when this happened, it was very rare, because, see, Kshatriyas are very passionate. They usually not only marry once, but have several wives. But Devarata said, no, I will not marry. So at that moment, the clouds parted and flowers showered from the sky, and all the demigods said, Bhishma, Bhishma, which means great vow. What a great vow. So this is the name, this is when he got the name Bhishma. From then on, he's known as Bhishma. So Bhishma then became the caretaker of the throne, but not the heir. And the daughter of the fisherman, whose name was Satyavati, became the queen. And her sons subsequently became heirs to the throne. So that's another history. Actually, I should just explain two of her sons. The first one was born blind. His name was Dhritarashtra. And the second one was pale, but whole and healthy and strong. His name was Pandu. Pandu means whitish, pale. So Pandu, the younger son, became the prince regent because Dhritarashtra could not do it due to his blindness. But Dhritarashtra had sons, and Pandu had sons. And then when Pandu died prematurely, their two sons engaged in this civil war. Pandu's sons were actually the rightful heirs. The Dhritarashtra's sons said, their father's not around, we can take the throne from them. And Dhritarashtra, the old blind king, was kind of like wishy-washy. He knew what was right, but he couldn't bring himself to do it because his sons were so dear to him. They were very crooked, but dear to him. So he always looked the other way and let them create all this trouble. So that's what caused the Kurukshetra war in the first place, this big war that Yudhishthira is lamenting. But Yudhishthira's side prevailed. Now, and Bhishma, meanwhile, he had taken a vow, I will always defend the throne of Hastinapur, no matter who's on it. So the Pandavas were cheated out of the throne, and Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana became the king. And Bhishma remained loyal to Duryodhana, even though he detested him. That was how principled they were, that he had made this commitment, so he stayed loyal even to the corrupt king. And so in the war, Duryodhana made sure that Bhishma, who was the greatest of the warriors, was fighting on his side. And then every day he would get on his case and say, you like the Pandavas, my enemies, you like them too much, you're so nice to them, you're not trying your hardest. Every day he would pressure him like this. And Bhishma he'd be furious, but he would control his anger. And then, anyway, there's many, many beautiful pastimes associated with that. But Bhishma finally said, Duryodhana, look, Krishna came in this war and he promised that he would not take up a weapon. Okay? Krishna promised that he would not take up a weapon because he was related to both sides. He said, one side can have my army and the other side could have me, but I won't fight. So Duryodhana said, give me your army. And Arjuna said, please be on my side. So after being pressured day after day, Bhishma finally said, look, Duryodhana, today I will force Krishna to take up his weapons or I will kill Arjuna, one of the two. And so during that day's battle, Bhishma was fighting so ferociously, and Arjuna loved him like a grandfather. He just could not bear to really do his best in spite of Krishna pressing him. And so when Krishna saw that his devotee Arjuna was about to be killed by Bhishma, he jumped off the chariot, picked up a broken chariot wheel, and started running at Bhishma to kill him. And this is what Bhishma wanted. He wanted out of this situation. And he thought the way for me to get out is I want to be killed by Krishna. So Bhishma was fighting, he was shooting arrows at Krishna, and they were hitting him, and it made Krishna's body look like a beautiful tree with red flowers. And Krishna seemed to enjoy being penetrated by these arrows of Bhishma. And Bhishma was watching, and then he finally said, okay, good, Krishna's going to kill me now with this broken chariot wheel. One of Krishna's names is Ratangapani, which means one who attacked with the chariot wheel. So Bhishma's ready, okay, let me have it. But just then the sun went down, and that was the official end of fighting for the day. So he was not killed. And then Krishna got a little more persistent with Arjuna. Look, you've got to try harder. And with the help of other warriors, they finally managed to shoot Bhishma full of arrows. However, Bhishma had a boon. When he gave up his throne for his father blessed him and said, "You can die whenever you want, at any time you want, and you will not have to die before that." So Bhishma had this yogic power in spite of being completely incapacitated with all these arrows shot through him. But he knew that the auspicious time to leave one's body is when the sun is in the north, when the days are getting longer and it's ascending. And so he's waiting there in this state, like in a yogic trance, just waiting for the proper time, lying on his bed of arrows. So Krishna says to Yudhishthira, "You're so depressed, you don't know if you want to do this, rule the kingdom. Let's go see Bhishma." That's what's happening now in this chapter. Bhishma's lying there on the arrows. Yes. How long was he laying on the arrows? I think a couple of weeks, something like that, roughly. Not many days. No. I've never heard that. Yeah. Yes. Waiting for the sun to enter the north. That's because in the Gita, chapter 8, this is described. There's certain auspicious times for yogis to leave their body, and it should be in light and not in darkness. So when the sun's in the south, the days are shorter. When the sun's in the north, the days get longer. So.
For an auspicious time if he was a devotee and Krishna was right there in front of it.
Why was he waiting? Because those are the details that can be observed if possible. Ultimately, they're secondary, but the etiquettes, the principle, what do you call it? The practices, the tradition should be honored whenever possible. Okay, so if anyone would like to die. Right, that's a big festival in India, isn't it? It's a big festival when the days start getting longer. Right? It's interesting, you think the days get shorter in the winter, but in fact they get longer in the winter and shorter in the summer. Right, after the solstice in June, then the days start getting shorter. And after the solstice in December or January, in this case, on this lunar calendar, then they start getting longer. All right, anything else?
This is, but just to reply to Nate about the blood, wanting to have all the blood drop out. I've heard, again, I don't know how Shastric this is, but I've heard that part of the reason Bhishmadev couldn't make the right decisions is because he took prasadam from Duryodhana.
Oh, because
and that contaminated.
Oh, therefore he wanted to get rid of all of that contamination. Okay. There's beautiful nuances like that. So many from our acharyas. So, all right, let's read the translations then for verses 1 through 9. Who'd like to start? Jesse.
Sutta Goswami said, being afraid for having killed so many subjects on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhisthira went to the scene of the massacre. There, Bhishmadev was lying on a bed of arrows, about to pass away.
That time, all his brothers followed him on beautiful chariots drawn by first-class horses, decorated with gold ornaments. With them were Vyasa and rishis like Dhamya, the learned priest of the Pandavas, and others.
O sage among the Brahmanas, Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, also followed, seated on a chariot with Arjuna. Thus, King Yudhisthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera surrounded by his companions, the Yakas.
Seeing him, he stood lying on the ground, like a demigod falling from the sky. The pen of the king Yudhisthira alone with his younger brothers and Lord Krishna, bowed down before him.
Just to see the chief of the descendants of King Bharat, Bhishma, all the great souls in the universe, namely the rishis among the demigods, Brahmins, and kings, all situated in the quality of goodness, were assembled there.
All the sages like Parvati Muni, Narada, Domya, Vyas, the incarnation of God, Brihadashva, Bharadvaja, and Parashuram, and disciples, Vashishta, Indra Pramada, Trita, Giritsamada, Asita, Kakshivan, Gautama, Atri, Koshika, and Sudarshana were present.
And many others like Shukadev Goswami and other purified souls, Kashyapa and Angrirasa and others, all accompanied by their respective disciples, arrived there.
Bhishmadev, who was the best among the 8 Vasus, received and welcomed all the great and powerful rishis who were assembled there, for he knew perfectly all the religious principles according to time and place.
Okay, we're going to do that verse in detail. Yeah, 9. Please. Tansametan Mahabhagan Upalabhya Vasutamaha Pujayam Asadharmo Gyo Deshakala Vibhagavid Tansametam Mahabhagan Upalabhya Vasutamaha Ujayam Asadharma Gyo Desha Kala Vibhagavid. Shakala Vibhagavid. Tansametan Mahabhaga Upalabhya Vasutamaha Ujayam Asadharma Gyo Desha Kala Vibhagavid.
Tansametan Mahabhaga
Tansametan Mahabhaga
Upalabhya
Vasutamaha Ujayam Asadharma Gyo Desha Kala Vibhagavid. Tansametan Mahabhaga Upalabhya Vasutamaha Pujayam Asadharma Gyo Desha Kala Vibhagavid. Synonyms together, please. Tan, all of them. Sametan, assembled together. Mahabhagan, all greatly powerful. Upalabhya, having received. Vasutamaha, the best among the Vasus, Vishmadev. Pujayam Asa, welcome. Dharmagya, one who knows religious principles. Desha, place. Kala, Vibhagavid, one who knows the adjustment of place and time. In translation together. Vishmadev, who was the best among the 8 Vasus, received and welcomed all great powerful rishis were assembled there, for he knew perfectly well all the principles according to time and place. Would like to read the purport? Get one of the ladies to read it.
Expert religionists know perfectly well how to adjust religious principles in terms of time and place. All the great acharyas or religious preachers or reformers of the world executed their mission by adjustment of religious principles in terms of time and place. There are different climates and situations in different parts of the world. If one has to discharge his duties to preach the message of the Lord, he must be expert in adjusting things in terms of time and place. Bhishma Dev was one of the 12 great authorities in preaching this cult of devotional service, and therefore he could receive and welcome all the powerful sages assembled there at his deathbed from all parts of the universe. He was certainly unable at that time to welcome and receive them physically, because he was neither at his home nor in a normal healthy condition. But he was quite fit by the activities of his sound mind, and therefore he could utter sweet words with hearty expressions, and all of them were well received. One can perform one's duty by physical work, by mind, and by words, and he knew well how to utilize them in proper place, and therefore there was no difficulty for him to receive them, although physically unfit.
So this verse begins with the best among the 8 Vasus, Vasutama. So you remember the 7 brothers who were drowned? There's a backstory. There's a backstory to everything. So the backstory in this case, there were once these demigods named Vasus, the Vasus, who were observing a sage who had a Kamadhenu. I forget who it was. Vashishta or Vashishta. So this Kamadhenu is a cow that gives anything you want. It's like Amazon except immediate delivery, and and no charge. So the Kamadhenu is a very desirable possession, and these Vasus became envious of the sage who owned it. They were thinking, well, we can use so many things. He's just living out here taking a little food or whatever from this valuable cow. So the ringleader of the Vasus was named Bu, B-H-U. And said, let's go steal it. So they attempted to steal the cow, and they were foiled by the sage, who cursed them all to die. And then they begged for forgiveness, and he said, all right, you have to fall down from your role as demigods and take birth as human beings, but you can all have short lives, except for this one, the ringleader, Boo. You got to live a long time. So that is the backstory of Bhishma. He was formerly this fallen demigod, and therefore he's known as the Sutama, the best of them, although he sounds like the worst of them. He was the leader. So his brothers just had this very short life. I have a god brother and god sister in Alachua who many years ago had a very welcomed child, but the child was stillborn. And the mother, Pragatmika, wrote this beautiful article in Back to Godhead about her stillborn son or daughter. Anyway, she was just saying that this child obviously just had a little bit of karma. The soul just had a little bit of karma to work out. And so we've been able to facilitate that. And now this child is free, taking birth in a family of devotees. And so this beautiful philosophical reflection was so nice, instead of the grief that one would ordinarily feel. So these short life it's just indicative of how things in this world are so different from what they appear to be. It appears like if somebody's doing great materially, they're on the highest platform of human life, on the Raganuga Boga, great spontaneous material enjoyment. But in fact, behind that facade is the same misery that everybody else goes through. The same heartbreak, the same illnesses, the same suffering, like in Hollywood now. All these very rich and elite people had to have their homes burned. And all of a sudden, their very ideal life is just ashes, and they have to start all over again. And so, what is the permanence of things in this world? So, to have a short birth in this case was a blessing. To have a long birth was an accelerated or accentuated curse. So, what is the whole goal of medical science? Isn't it just to extend our lives as long as possible? So in the Bhagavatam says that people's lives will become shorter in Kali Yuga. And yet we see that statistically it appears that people are living longer. the lifespan of our ancestors probably in the 30s, 40s, or 50s. But now it's much more, 70s or 80s. Actually, it's in the 70s. That's the average lifespan for people in America. Women, I believe, it's 76. No, men are 76 and women are 80 something, 81. Women have to live longer. So I'm very conscious of these numbers now that I'm in my 70s. But anyway, the average lifespan appears to be lengthening. But as Narayana Maharaj points out in the 11th canto commentary, when you factor in all the abortions, when people, their lifespan is all of a sudden artificially reduced, and then you take an average, it's shortened. So in any case, Bhishma had this background, and as a result of his long life, he became a very elevated devotee. He was quite reconciled or compensated for his previous rascaldom. In fact, he was such a great devotee that he was known as one of the 12 Mahajanas, or great authorities in spiritual life. The verses given in the Mahabharata that how do we know what is right to do, what is religious, what is spiritual, what is a proper thing to do? And the answer is given that Mahajana Yena Gatasa Panta. You know what's right by following the lead of previous spiritualists. That's the ultimate criterion for making good spiritual decisions. Mahajana Yena Gatasa Panta. So specifically, 12 great devotees are mentioned, and Bhishma is amongst them. So in this case, we're seeing how expertly he applied the principles of devotional service. This section lists a great number of famous leading sages from the whole universe who had gathered to hear the conversation between Yudhisthira and Bhishma. So all these great souls were coming. And in the purports, which we're not reading this morning, but if you'd like to, there's descriptions of all of these sages. Prabhupada gives detailed descriptions of all of them, nearly all of them. And so Bhishma naturally would be very keen to welcome them. And you welcome a guest with three things in Vedic culture. What are the three things? Water, a seat, and sweet words. So Bhishma, being unable to move and not in his home, he couldn't really offer, he could not offer a seat, he could not offer water, but he did offer sweet words. So that's what we're going to be reading now in tomorrow's class, all of the welcoming speeches that Bhishma is giving. So this, try to see the incongruity of this. You know, typically if somebody is on their deathbed, we're going to go in a very sympathetic mood and in a mood of service. How can I help you feel better? What can I say? What can I do so that you can feel better? But Yudhisthira is depressed and he's coming to Bhishma for advice. So it's very incongruous. And yet Bhishma is very happy to see Yudhisthira, because the outcome of the war was what he desired. He wanted the Pandavas to be reinstated. He wanted Dharma to be upheld. He didn't want Duryodhana to win, although he was forced to fight for him. So he's happy with the outcome. He's happy to see Yudhisthira. And so he's in a good position to give him encouragement. You know, if we're depressed, it's very hard to help somebody else who is depressed, right? All you can do is try to show I'm more depressed than you are, so don't feel so bad. But Bhishma is just in the opposite space. He is just so happy to see Yudhisthira. So he's in a great position to give him the instructions. And Krishna, knowing this, has brought Yudhisthira for this reason. So Bhishma is Mahajana, a great authority, because he knows how to reconcile principles of devotion to circumstances. In the verse we read this, Desha Kala Vibhagavid. Desha is this place and Kala is the time. So according to time and place, to apply the principles of devotion. So we have this wonderful opportunity to study these great literatures and to understand and apply this great spiritual science in our lives, because Srila Prabhupada was able to adjust according to time and circumstance. See, Srila Prabhupada, first of all, crossed the ocean. Now, if you're a sannyasi in India, you're not supposed to go anywhere else but stay in the sacred land of India so that you can die in the holy place and go back to Godhead. That's the injunction for a renunciate. But Prabhupada got on the boat and sailed the ocean. So immediately he was subject to criticism for leaving India. But the higher principle was to try to help people. So for that reason, for this higher purpose, he took this difficult journey at this advanced age. And then when he reached America, he was astonished to see the culture. It's like Gandhi was asked, what do you think of Western civilization? He said, I think it would be a good idea. So, for those who've been to India or born in India, you know there's such a cultural difference. It's shrinking, but by and large, the degree of degradation in the West is quite different, quite severe. The influence of the modes is far more conspicuous. At least there is some remnant of a cultured, spiritually based civilization that you can still see in India, and people feel the value of spiritual principles. The poet or the transcendentalist Emerson wrote that in India, or the West rather, is this peculiar part of the world where people think they only have one life. So there's a huge difference in our lives when we think that we have just one lifetime, or we have repeated lifetimes because we're eternal beings. You see? It changes everything. It changes every decision. It changes every perception and attitude. Just this one foundational piece of knowledge. For example, in World War II, the British imposed an artificial famine. They were the governors of India at that time. So they imposed an artificial famine on the millions of people of India so that the men would join the army and help them fight, especially the Punjabis, who are known as great warriors. Gurkhas, the Sikhs, yeah. Gurkhas, Gurkha means like Go Raksha, one who protects the cows. So they are known as very fierce warriors, and the British wanted them to join. So when this famine was imposed on them, in the West, there would have been a riot. If there wasn't enough food, there'd be a riot. But the Indian mentality was such that people, okay, I'm enduring my suffering due to my past karma. I'm going to have another lifetime. Let me not do anything to create a bad situation for myself in the next life. Let me not steal or hurt others. And the British were surprised. How can you endure this? And they said, we are praying for our British overlords to have the strength to stand up to all the blows they so richly deserve. So the time and circumstance that Prabhupada saw in the West was so different from what he was used to, but he expertly adjusted things. One of the main adjustments was to have women in ashrams. In India, that's unheard of practically. If there are women's ashrams, they're very cloistered, like nunneries, no men around. But he saw that in the West, people were accustomed to co-educational environments. Everybody grew up that way. And so he implemented this to much criticism from his godbrothers. He said, you shouldn't change this tradition. But he said, these godbrothers are critical, or these other leaders are critical of my liberal attitudes, but I am finding success, whereas they're going to just have to be satisfied with their critical attitude. So in this way, proper application of principles according to time and circumstance is ideal. In the West, that application means treating everybody equally with spiritual opportunities. In India, it means observing traditional social roles. So ISKCON in India is popular. It's very popular. It used to be much less popular than in the West, but it's very popular now because ISKCON is seen as the paragon holding up these traditional principles. But if you try to implement these traditional principles in the West, then it's completely irrelevant for everybody except the Hindu diaspora. And so Prabhupada's pranam mantra that we chant every day, Paschatya Desha Tarine, his great qualification was that he reached people in the West, because Krishna consciousness is not limited to people from India. It's meant for every living being. Everybody is dormant Krishna conscious entity. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Kabanoy. So loving Krishna is dormant in everyone's heart. Just like eating is a natural function of every person. And especially prasadam, yes. But eating is natural. But if we're sick with nausea or diarrhea or indigestion, then we don't eat. Right? So eating is dormant, but due to the disease, we're not eating temporarily. So in the same way, loving Krishna is dormant. It's natural. It's the normal condition of life. But due to our materialistic disease, right now we're not doing it. So the expert physician can cure the disease and restore the normal state of being for the soul. So this is the adjustment of time and place that Prabhupada made. It's so nice, so profound, and is the foundation for our success. People ordinarily would not have anything to do, great spiritualists would not have anything to do with people like us. But the compassion of the Vaishnava is more important than the Vedic social traditions. So any questions or comments, reflections? Yes, Prabhu.
Relating to what we spoke about in regards to life expectancy and the will to live and to maintain the material body, I think it's mantra 2 of Sri Upanishad that talks about one can go on, or one can endeavor to live for 100 years if they live a life in Ishavasham. And so could you speak on that a little bit in connection to this?
Yeah, if you get if you're a responsible person and you get a car, then that car will serve you a long time because you maintain it nicely, right? If you're irresponsible, it'll get dented and you won't get oil changes, and it'll get and you'll overheat the engine and burn it out. So the body is like that. It is an incredible gift, an incredible vehicle for spiritual life, and to aspire to live for hundreds of years, which that verse states, it simply means that one can live a life that is healthy, fulfilling, balanced, that prioritizes the needs of the soul. Because you see, for a person who's enlightened in spiritual life, jiva va marava. It doesn't matter if you live or die. It doesn't matter. Whereas the materialist, you want to live as long as possible. But for the spiritualist, it doesn't matter. You're serving Krishna now, and you'll serve Krishna when your body is finished.
You see a lot of beings very much caught in this, like, I have to feed this body the healthiest food. I have to be raw vegan or paleo or keto and do this and that. And it's just this like mega constrictive bodily material disease.
Yeah.
And so how can one seek to serve Krishna and also desire to maintain the body?
Right,
you know?
right. That's the sweet spot. It's the balance. In my own spiritual journey, the first thing I did when I decided to go on the spiritual path is like, okay, I'm going to purify my diet. And then I've seen that many, many times with other people, because we're in the bodily concept of life. So the first step is let me, purify my body. And that really is a sincere step towards the mode of goodness. It's a good thing. However, it has its limits, obviously, because no matter how much paleo you eat or whatever, you're going to have to die. So with time, those considerations tend to reduce. Now, but really the practical question is, do you have a physical condition that requires a special diet? Some people do, but many people who feel like they should really don't. Yeah. So our policy at Krishna House is let people eat what they like. If people feel that they need a special diet, we do our best to accommodate them. And over time, in many cases, they're able to adjust to the regular diet that's served. This question was brought up to Srila Prabhupada, and he said, just eat rice, dal, and chapatis. All the vitamins are there. Unless there's, people have Crohn's disease or some kind of blood issues, and they have to have a special diet, then you have to take care of it. But if it's not the case, then it's beautiful to just be able to eat whatever Krishna sends. It's great, especially for single people. All of us crusty old householders, we want to cook this and this. But my years as a single person, it was really nice. Just, okay, whatever Krishna sends. And I don't know, somehow I've maintained the same weight that I had when I was 18 for 52 years. Just taking whatever Krishna provides. So I can confidently say for most of us, it's a good approach. Okay? All right, hope that helps. Anything else? That's a great segue to breakfast. Oh, okay. Oh, Adisham. I don't know, can Adisham make a comment that will cause breakfast to be delayed for something? Would you like to vote? No, please, go ahead.
I just think about when you were talking about the beginning of the class about Yudhishthira being the last one approaching Krishna, being all morose by what he had do in the line of his service.
Yeah.
I remember the other point that you often make, the relationship before service. Is it relevant in this case? Because he was concerned about a relationship he had to break and hurt so many of his relatives, but he had to do the service. So is there a correlation to both those statements?
Okay, so the idea is that in personalism, we put relationships before service, which means we avoid the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance, speaking harshly to people, turning people off in order to get something done. Yeah. And so in this case, you're saying Yudhishthira was putting the relationship with his relatives, now dead, but he put the service ahead of the relationship, and therefore his army killed them all. That's very good, yes. That was his natural inclination, the mode of goodness, to put the relationship first, but circumstances forced him. Yes. We have to remember that Krishna had a purpose in descending to earth. And what was that purpose? Yeah. Yes, there was all this excessive military buildup. And so earth was suffering, and Krishna said, all right, we'll get rid of the army. And what better way to get rid of armies to have them fight each other? It's very efficient. So in this way, Krishna induced Yudhishthira to put service before relationships. And now he's feeling the result, like you said. I forgot to mention, by the way, getting back briefly to Jackson's question, the Prabhupada gave a hierarchy of priorities for devotees, 4 things. Do anyone remember what's the first one? Health, and sadhana, and service, and shastra, right, reading. So health is the top of the list, because if you're not healthy, you really can't do anything else. And there's a kind of overzealousness sometimes that gets us to think, okay, I can sacrifice my health for Krishna. Okay, I didn't get enough sleep. That's all right. I'm going to go do my service. And this kind of mode of passion causes distress. Therefore, keep comfortable so you can serve nicely. That's the first priority. And then sadhana, especially japa. If you can chant early in the day, that will bring you so many benefits for your whole life. All right, anything else? YOLO. No, it might make clear. You only live once, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that enlightening conclusion of class. Well, you made my point. This is the West, right? Prabhupada saw this and thought, oh my God, what have I done? Have you read this poem, Martine Bhagavat Dharma? When he first arrived in Boston and the captain took him off the boat, he saw America for the first time. He got back on the boat and he wrote this poem. Krishna, why have you brought me to this terrible place? Anyway, you must have some business with me, so make me dance. That's it. I just want to mention that for those especially who are new and maybe have not had a chance to cover these first few chapters that we reviewed, I wrote a summary of the first canto of Bhagavatam that you can read in about an hour. It's in this The Saint Within book. I brought a few copies here if anyone would like one, help yourself. That way you can catch up quickly on where we are in the reading of the first canto. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sadham ki jai. Sagare Tanamadi Karati Lobamosu Drumati Kake Jetaka Tina Samsare Krishna Bada Doyamoy Gori Bara Jivaja Swa Prasadana Delo Bhai Sayana Mritapao Radha Krishna Gunaga Preme Dako Chaitanya Nitai Jani Mai Jani Tai Srila Prabhupada ki jai Gora Premanande Hari Hari Bo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare